There's someone you know. Maybe you have known them for years. They sit in the corner at gatherings, not because something is wrong, but because something is right. Because they are listening, noticing, absorbing everything the room is doing while everyone else is busy talking. You have probably described them as quiet, maybe shy, maybe a little hard to read. Maybe you have wondered at some point whether they are okay. They are okay. They are more than okay. They are just built differently than the world gave you permission to understand. This is a video about introverts, but more than that, it is a video about the 4 things that almost everyone, including introverts themselves, has gotten completely wrong about what introversion actually is. Because the misunderstandings are not small. They are not minor details. They have shaped how introverts have been treated at school, at work, in relationships, in their own families. They have made millions of people feel like something is broken in them that was never broken at all. Let us start at the very beginning. The first thing everyone gets wrong about introverts is the one that starts earliest. Usually in childhood, usually in a classroom, usually when a teacher writes something on a report card that says quiet or reserved or needs to participate more. The assumption is simple, it is deeply held, and it is wrong. The assumption is that introversion and shyness are the same thing. They are not. Shyness is fear. It is the anxiety of social judgment, the dread of being seen and found wanting. A shy person wants to connect but feels afraid. The discomfort is the defining feature, the wish to be different, to be less afraid, to enter the room with the ease that other people seem to carry so naturally. Introversion is something else entirely. It is not fear, it is preference. It is the way a nervous system processes the world. Psychologists have understood for decades that the introvert and extrovert distinction comes down to something fundamental, how the brain responds to stimulation. The extrovert's brain is wired to seek stimulation from the outside world. Noise, activity, social energy, these things fuel it. The more input, the better. The more conversation, the more alive they feel. Their battery charges when the room is full. The introvert's brain works differently. It's not that external stimulation feels bad. It's that the introvert's brain is already running at a higher baseline level of internal activity. Thoughts, observations, patterns, meanings. The inner world is constantly generating. Too much external stimulation on top of that does not energize, it overwhelms. And so the introvert's battery charges not in the crowd, but in the quiet afterward. This is not a flaw. This is neurology. But the confusion between shyness and introversion has followed quiet people through their entire lives, making them feel as though the way their brain naturally works is a problem to be solved, rather than a feature to be understood. The second thing everyone gets wrong follows naturally from the first, and it is perhaps the one that has caused the most damage in relationships. It is the belief that introverts do not like people. You've seen it play out. The introvert who does not come to every gathering is labeled antisocial. The one who needs time alone after a long week is seen as cold. The one who doesn't fill silences with small talk is assumed to be unfriendly, withholding, perhaps even arrogant. Here's what's actually happening. Introverts do not dislike people. What introverts often dislike, what genuinely exhausts them, is shallow interaction. Surface-level conversation, the kind of talking that fills space without exchanging anything real, the weather, the weekend, the generic pleasantries that circle without ever landing anywhere that matters.
Because the introvert brain, with its high internal activity, is already processing the world at depth. When they engage with another person, they want that same depth. They want to know what the person actually thinks, what they are actually afraid of, what they have been quietly carrying that they have not told anyone else. They want the conversation that starts where small talk ends. This is why introverts will often seem distant in a group of 10, but completely alive in a conversation with one. It is not that the group made them anxious, it is that the group made meaningful exchange impossible. And for an introvert, an evening of impossible exchange is not just boring, it is draining in a way that is difficult to explain to someone whose battery charges from the noise. Research on introvert social behavior consistently shows something that surprises people when they first encounter it. Introverts, on average, report fewer but deeper friendships than extroverts. They invest more time and attention in a smaller number of connections. They remember details. They follow up on things people mentioned months ago. They show up, quietly and completely, for the people they have chosen. The introvert does not dislike people. The introvert has simply decided that if they are going to give their energy, and their energy is finite in a way the extroverts is not, they are going to give it to connections that actually mean something. This is not coldness. This is one of the most quietly generous things a person can do. The third misunderstanding is the one that has probably cost introverts the most in terms of how they are seen and treated in the world, in schools, in workplaces, in leadership, in life. It is the assumption that quietness equals weakness, that the person who does not speak first is the person with the least to say, that confidence lives in volume, and that the introvert, by choosing silence, is somehow opting out of the competition. This misunderstanding is so embedded in culture that we built entire systems around it. Classrooms that reward participation, open-plan offices that reward visibility, meetings where the loudest voice is assumed to carry the most authority, performance reviews that note leadership potential in people who speak and quietly pass over the ones who think before they do. But there is a concept in psychology called the quiet confidence of the introvert, and it is real. Because what the introvert is doing in the silence is not nothing. The introvert is observing, processing, waiting until they have something worth saying before they say it. They are not performing confidence, they are building it internally through the kind of careful preparation and deep thinking that turns out to produce some of the most reliable, considered judgment of anyone in the room. Study after study on introvert leadership has found something that should reshape how we think about authority. Introverted leaders outperform extroverted leaders in environments where the team is proactive and self-directed. Because the introvert leader listens. They do not fill every silence with their own voice. They create space for the people around them to think, to contribute, to rise. And in doing so, they build teams that are stronger than the ones built around a single loud personality. The young, quiet person in the room is not the one with nothing to offer. They are often the one who has noticed everything, said nothing yet, and is waiting for the moment when speaking will actually change something. That is not weakness. That is discipline that most people will spend their whole lives trying to develop. But of all the things the world has gotten wrong about introverts, and there are many, the fourth misunderstanding is the one that cuts deepest. It is the one that does not come from outside the introvert at all. It is the one that introverts have been taught to believe about themselves. The belief that the way they are wired is a problem, that the preference for quiet is a deficit, that the need for solitude is a symptom. That somewhere between the report cards that said needs to participate more and the jobs that said not a team player and the relationships that said you are too much in your own head, somewhere in all of that accumulated evidence, the introvert began to agree.
They began to perform extroversion, to push past their natural limits, to attend every gathering, answer every message immediately, fill every silence, wear the exhaustion like a medal, and call it being normal. Psychologists have a name for this. It is called introvert masking, and the cost of it is not small. Because what happens when a person spends years being someone they are not, even in the small, daily, accumulated way that introvert masking demands, is what always happens when we ask a nervous system to run against its own design. It works for a while, and then quietly, it stops working. The anxiety increases. The creativity decreases. The sense of self becomes thin and hard to locate. And the introvert, who was never broken to begin with, begins to genuinely wonder whether something is wrong with them. Nothing is wrong with them. But to understand why, to really understand it in the way that changes something, we need to go deeper into what introversion actually is.
what the science says about how these minds work, and what it means not just to survive as an introvert in a world built for extroverts, but to actually thrive. Because that is the conversation nobody is having, and it is the one that matters most. The fourth thing everyone gets wrong about introverts is the most personal. It is not something the world does to them from the outside. It is something the world teaches them to do to themselves. It is the belief that introversion is something to be fixed. It starts young. The child who prefers books to birthday parties is taken to see someone. The teenager who wants a Friday night alone instead of with a group is told they need to push themselves. The adult who recharges in silence is handed a self-help book about becoming more confident, more visible, more present in the way that presence has been defined by people who are not built like them. And slowly, gradually, in the way that accumulated messages always work, the introvert begins to internalize the diagnosis. There must be something to fix, because everyone around them seems to find the world so much easier. And if the world feels harder for me, the logic goes, the problem must be me. But here is what the research actually shows. Introversion is not a deficit. It is not a disorder. It is not even a personality type in the way we casually use that term. It is a fundamental orientation of the nervous system, as stable and as biological as being left-handed, as having a particular metabolism, as responding to cold differently than someone beside you in the same room. You cannot fix introversion because introversion is not broken. What is broken is the framework we have been given to understand it. And when an introvert spends years trying to perform extroversion, attending every gathering past the point of their energy, speaking in meetings before their thoughts are ready, building a social life that looks right from the outside while something quietly depletes inside, what they are doing is not growing. They are not becoming a better version of themselves. They are running their nervous system at a setting it was never designed to sustain. Psychologists who study introvert burnout, and it is a real and documented phenomenon, describe it in strikingly consistent terms. It does not announce itself dramatically. It does not arrive like a crisis. It accumulates. A slow dimming of the things that used to bring pleasure. A growing difficulty in doing even the quiet restorative things that used to feel effortless. A sense of being present in your life, but somehow not quite inside it. The introvert who has been masking for long enough stops being able to find themselves when they finally have a moment alone, because the performance has run so deep that the original signal has become hard to locate. But this is where the story changes. Because the same research that documents the cost of introvert masking also documents something remarkable about what happens when introverts are allowed, or allow themselves, to simply be what they are. The introvert mind, operating in its natural state, is one of the most powerful cognitive environments that exists. The default mode network, the part of the brain that activates during internal thought, reflection, and imagination, is measurably more active in introverts than in extroverts. What this means in practical terms is that the introvert brain is, at rest, doing what other brains only do when they are deliberately trying. It is making connections. It is finding patterns. It is running simulations of future scenarios, processing emotional experiences, creating meaning out of what has been observed and stored. The introvert who is sitting quietly at the back of the room and appears to be doing nothing is, neurologically speaking, doing an extraordinary amount. This is why introverts so often excel at creative work, at strategic thinking, at writing, at any discipline that requires the sustained, uninterrupted attention of a mind that knows how to go deep. Not because they are smarter, intelligence has nothing to do with introversion or extroversion, but because they have a brain that has been practicing depth for as long as it has been alive. And this is why solitude for the introvert is not loneliness. It is not isolation. It is not the symptom of a person who cannot connect. It is the condition under which their most essential thinking happens. Remove the solitude, and you do not get a more social introvert. You get a less functional one, someone running without the fuel their particular engine requires.
If you are an introvert, I want to say something directly to you now. The years of being told you were too quiet, the classrooms that graded you on participation as though thinking silently did not count, the workplaces that promoted the louder voice in the room and overlooked the careful one, the relationships where your need for space was misread as distance and your depth was mistaken for coldness. All of that has left a mark. It would be strange if it had not. But I want you to hear this clearly. You were not too quiet. The room was too loud. You were not antisocial. You were selective, which is a form of self-respect, not a form of damage. You were not lacking confidence. You were waiting for the moment when your words would actually land somewhere that mattered. And your need for solitude was never a sign of weakness. It was your nervous system telling you exactly what it needed to do its best work. The world was built by extroverts for extroverts, and it has done a thorough job of convincing quiet people that the building plans were correct and they are the ones who need to change. But some of the most transformative thinkers, artists, leaders, and builders in human history were people who did their most important work in rooms that other people would have found unbearably still. Solitude was not their limitation, it was their method. You do not need to become louder. You do not need to perform comfort in spaces that genuinely drain you. You do not need to rebuild yourself around a template that was designed for a different kind of mind. What you need, what the introvert has always needed, is simply to be understood correctly. To have the 4 things everyone gets wrong named for what they actually are. Misunderstandings, not verdicts. Because when the introvert finally stops carrying the weight of other people's misreading, when they put down the performance and pick up the version of themselves that was always there underneath, something quietly remarkable happens. They do not become more, they become themselves. And that, it turns out, was always enough. If this video named something you have been carrying, if any part of it felt true in a way that mattered, then this channel exists for exactly this reason. These conversations deserve to continue, and so do you.